The salt-crusted lawyer's letter arrived on a Thursday morning, informing Rebecca Palmer that her stubborn refusal to sell her beach cottage was about to become significantly more complicated since the abandoned property next door had been inherited by someone with enough money to make her life difficult. Rebecca crumpled the letter and tossed it toward her recycling bin, missing by several inches. She had lived in her weathered beach cottage for 6 years, ever since she'd walked away from her corporate marketing job in Boston and decided to pursue her actual passion, restoring antique furniture. The cottage wasn't much, honestly, with its peeling blue paint and creaky porch that groaned with every ocean breeze. But it was hers, purchased with her savings and a modest loan she'd nearly finished paying off. The view alone made every struggle worthwhile, miles of gray-blue Atlantic stretching toward the horizon, dotted with lobster boats and the occasional seal. The property next door had stood empty for 3 years. Old Mrs. Chen had lived there until her death, and the house had slowly deteriorated, shutters banging loose, the garden growing wild with beach roses and poison ivy. Rebecca had gotten used to the privacy, the way she could play music late into the night while refinishing a Victorian dresser or sanding down a mid-century credenza. Now someone wanted to buy her out. The letter made it clear. The new owner of Mrs. Chen's property was interested in acquiring adjacent parcels to create a larger estate. Rebecca's cottage stood directly in the way of those plans. The offer was generous, genuinely generous, triple what she'd paid for the place. But money wasn't the point. This was her home, her workspace, her sanctuary. She'd built a life here in this small Maine coastal town, knew every shopkeeper by name, had standing coffee dates with the other local artists and craftspeople. She was bent over a mahogany table from the 1920s, carefully removing water stains, when she heard the truck rumbling down the sandy drive next door. Rebecca straightened, pressing her hand to her lower back. Through her salt-streaked window, she watched a convoy of vehicles pull up to Mrs. Chen's house. A black Range Rover followed by contractors' vans and a moving truck, so the new owner was moving in immediately. Rebecca returned to her work, trying to ignore the sounds of activity filtering through the walls. Power tools whirred. Men shouted instructions. Something heavy crashed, followed by laughter. She lasted until early evening before curiosity got the better of her. Rebecca wiped her hands on her work apron, pulled it off, and ran fingers through her auburn hair, which had escaped its ponytail in wild curls. She looked like she'd been working all day because she had been. Fine. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. The scene next door had transformed from the quiet abandonment she'd grown accustomed to. The overgrown yard was being cleared, trash bags piled near the road. The shutters had been removed entirely, and someone had pressure washed the siding, revealing the house's original gray color. On the porch stood a man in expensive jeans and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up, gesturing as he spoke to one of the contractors. Even from a distance, Rebecca could tell he was absurdly handsome. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and the kind of posture that suggested either military background or serious money. Probably both, given the vehicles in the driveway and the speed of the renovation. This had to be the inheritor, the one who wanted her property. He turned as she approached, and she caught the full impact of his face. Strong jaw, intense dark eyes, a mouth that looked like it smiled easily though it wasn't smiling now. He was probably in his early 30s, maybe a year or two older than her own 28 years. "Hello," Rebecca called out, stopping at the property line. "I'm Rebecca Palmer. I live next door." The man's expression shifted, something guarded moving behind his eyes. He said something to the contractor, then walked across the patchy lawn toward her. Up close, he was even more striking, with the kind of presence that probably made boardrooms go quiet when he entered. "Bennett Irving," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, warm despite the cool evening air. "I inherited this place from my great-aunt." "Mrs. Chen was your great-aunt?" Rebecca couldn't hide her surprise. Bennett Irving looked nothing like Mrs. Chen had, but then again, families were complicated, through marriage. "My great-uncle was her second husband. They divorced 30 years ago, but apparently she never changed her will." He shrugged, a gesture that seemed practiced, like he was used to explaining complicated family dynamics. "I didn't even know she existed until the lawyers contacted me." "I'm sorry for your loss." The words came automatically, though Rebecca wasn't sure they applied given what he'd just said. "Thank you, though I never met her." Bennett glanced back at the house, which was already looking more alive with workers moving through it. "The place needs work." "It's been empty for a while." Rebecca hesitated, then decided to address the elephant directly. "I got a letter from some law firm. They said you want to buy my property." Bennett's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That wasn't supposed to arrive yet. I haven't even moved in." "So it's true." "Look, it's just preliminary. I have people who handle acquisitions and they move fast sometimes. Too fast." He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "I'm planning to expand the property eventually, yes. Create something bigger, but I'm not trying to force anyone out. Just offering enough money that most people wouldn't refuse." Rebecca kept her voice level, conversational. "Is that a crime?" His tone sharpened slightly, a hint of the businessman underneath the casual clothes. "No, but I'm not selling." Rebecca met his eyes steadily. "I know the offer was generous. I appreciate that, truly. But this is my home and my workshop. I'm not interested in moving regardless of price." Something flickered across Bennett's face. Not anger exactly, maybe frustration mixed with respect. "The lawyers said you might say that." "They also said everyone has a price." "Then your lawyers don't know everyone." Rebecca smiled, taking the edge off her words. "Welcome to the neighborhood, Bennett Irving. I hope you enjoy the house. But mine isn't for sale now or later, so please tell your acquisition people to stop wasting postage." She turned and walked back to her cottage before he could respond, her heart hammering. That had been more confrontational than she'd intended, but something about his assumption that money could solve everything had gotten under her skin. She'd worked hard to escape that world, the one where everything was transactional and nothing had value beyond its price tag. Through her window, she watched Bennett return to his contractors, his posture rigid. He was angry, probably. Well, he'd get over it. Rebecca had dealt with difficult neighbors before. At least he was fixing up the house instead of letting it rot further. The next morning, Rebecca woke to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of hammering. She made her own coffee, stronger and cheaper than whatever Bennett was probably drinking, and headed out to her workshop, which occupied what should have been the garage. She had 3 pieces in various stages of restoration. The mahogany table, a maple wardrobe with gorgeous grain that just needed new hardware, and a teak desk that someone had painted white for some inexplicable reason. She was midway through stripping the desk when she heard footsteps on her gravel drive. Rebecca looked up to find Bennett standing in the doorway of her workshop, holding 2 cups from the fancy coffee place in town. "Peace offering," he said, holding one out. "I don't know how you take it, so I got a cappuccino and a regular coffee with cream." Rebecca set down her scraper, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Regular coffee sounds good." He handed it over, keeping the cappuccino for himself. For a moment they stood in awkward silence, Rebecca leaning against her work table while Bennett studied the furniture around them. "You restore these?" he asked, genuine interest in his voice. Buy them at estate sales, auctions, sometimes just from people's basements. Fix them up, sell them. Rebecca sipped the coffee, which was actually perfect. It's not lucrative, but I love it. It's good work. Bennett moved closer to the mahogany table, running his finger along the edge where she'd already restored the finish. This is beautiful. Original hardware, mostly. I had to replace 2 of the drawer pulls, but I found period-appropriate ones. Rebecca found herself warming to him despite her earlier irritation. You know furniture. My grandfather was a carpenter. Used to spend summers with him, learning woodworking. Bennett's expression softened with the memory. That was before everything got complicated. Rebecca wanted to ask what he meant by complicated, but he'd already shifted back to business mode, the openness disappearing behind that polished exterior. About yesterday, Bennett said. I came on too strong. The truth is, the lawyers handle most of my property acquisitions. I buy, renovate, and usually sell. It's what I do. You're a real estate developer. Among other things, I have holdings in various sectors. He said it casually, but Rebecca heard what he wasn't saying. Bennett Irving wasn't just wealthy. He was seriously, substantially rich. But this place is different. I'm not planning to sell it. I want to live here. In Maine. Permanently. Rebecca couldn't hide her skepticism. Men like him, with their expensive watches and Range Rovers, didn't typically settle in small coastal towns where the biggest excitement was the summer lobster festival. That's the plan. Bennett met her eyes, and she saw something there, some weariness that didn't match his age. I'm tired of the city, tired of the corporate grind. My great-aunt apparently felt the same way. Maybe it's genetic. Despite herself, Rebecca felt a flicker of sympathy. She knew about running from the corporate grind, about needing to find something more authentic. But that didn't change her position. I'm still not selling, she said quietly. I know. Bennett finished his cappuccino, crumpling the cup in one large hand. I'm not here to pressure you, just wanted to introduce myself properly, neighbor to neighbor. Okay. Rebecca relaxed slightly. In that case, welcome to the neighborhood. Actually welcome, not sarcastic welcome. His smile transformed his face, made him look younger and less intimidating. Thanks. Fair warning, the renovations are going to be loud for the next few weeks. I'm having the whole place gutted and updated. If it gets unbearable, let me know. I'll survive. Rebecca gestured at her workshop. I make plenty of noise myself. After Bennett left, Rebecca tried to focus on the teak desk, but her mind kept wandering. There was something about him, an intensity that was both attractive and unsettling. She'd known plenty of wealthy men in her corporate days, had even dated a few. They all had that same confidence, that assumption that the world would bend to accommodate them. Bennett seemed to have it too, but there were cracks in the facade, moments where something more genuine showed through. Over the next week, Rebecca became unwillingly familiar with Bennett's routine. He was up early, usually on his porch with coffee by 6, laptop balanced on his knee as he worked. Contractors arrived by 7, and the noise began. True to his word, the renovation was comprehensive. Rebecca watched the house transform day by day. New windows installed, the roof repaired, the porch rebuilt with beautiful cedar that would weather to silver in the salt air. Bennett was there every day, not just supervising but working alongside the contractors. She'd see him hauling lumber, ripping out old drywall, his expensive clothes replaced with worn jeans and faded t-shirts that showed off a genuinely impressive physique. Whatever he'd done before moving here, it hadn't been purely sedentary. They fell into a pattern of polite waves, occasional brief conversations when they ended up getting their mail at the same time. Rebecca learned that Bennett had sold his tech company 2 years ago, some startup that had been acquired by a larger corporation for an amount he wouldn't specify, but that must have been substantial. He'd spent the time since investing in various ventures, traveling, and apparently being miserable. "You don't seem miserable now," Rebecca observed one afternoon. They were both in their respective yards, Bennett working on clearing the last of the overgrown garden while Rebecca cleaned out her gutters. "I'm getting there," Bennett said, pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead. "Turns out having nothing to do is worse than being overworked. At least here I have projects. Plural, the house. Learning to sail. There's a boat that came with the property, needs restoration." He gestured vaguely toward the small dock that both properties shared access to. "Plus I'm looking at some local investment opportunities. Small businesses that need capital." Rebecca climbed down from her ladder, curious despite herself. "What kind of businesses?" "There's a restaurant in town that wants to expand. A guy who builds custom kayaks who needs equipment. A woman who runs a maritime museum out of her garage." Bennett leaned on his rake, fully engaged now. "People with good ideas who just need backing. That's the kind of investing I want to do now. Something tangible, community-focused." It was hard not to be charmed by his enthusiasm. Rebecca found herself smiling. "That's actually really cool. Don't sound so surprised," but he was grinning too. "I'm not just some corporate raider looking to strip assets." "I didn't think you were." Rebecca paused. "Okay, maybe I thought that a little. Fair enough." "I haven't given you much reason to think otherwise." Bennett set down the rake, moving closer to the property line that separated them. "Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I meant what I said about not pressuring you to sell. I've called off the lawyers. Your property stays yours." Rebecca studied him, looking for the angle, the manipulation, but his expression was open, sincere. Just like that, just like that. "You were right. Not everything should be for sale." He met her eyes and something passed between them, some understanding that felt more significant than the words suggested. "Besides, I'm starting to think having you as a neighbor might not be so bad." Heat rose in Rebecca's cheeks, unexpected and unwelcome. She was not blushing over her wealthy, annoyingly attractive neighbor. She wasn't. "We'll see," she said lightly. "Winter here is brutal. You might change your mind about staying." "I don't usually change my mind once it's made up." Bennett's voice was quiet but firm. "It's a character flaw, according to most people who know me. Stubbornness can be good sometimes." Rebecca thought of her own refusal to sell, her decision to leave Boston despite everyone telling her she was crazy. "It depends what you're being stubborn about." The conversation lingered with Rebecca long after she went back inside. That evening, she found herself watching through the window as Bennett worked on his porch, installing new lighting fixtures as the sun set over the water. He moved with easy competence, comfortable with tools and physical labor in a way that surprised her. Most tech millionaires she'd known could barely hang a picture frame. The next day was Saturday, which meant Rebecca's weekly trip to various estate sales and antique shops in the region. She loaded her van at dawn, planning to hit 3 sales and an auction before dinner. The first 2 sales were busts, nothing but reproduction furniture and overpriced collectibles. But the third, at a farmhouse 40 minutes inland, proved more promising. She was examining a gorgeous oak sideboard, checking the joinery and originality of the finish, when she heard a familiar voice. "Rebecca." She turned to find Bennett standing near a table of vintage tools, looking as surprised as she felt. He wore jeans and a navy pullover, his hair slightly messy in a way that shouldn't have been attractive but absolutely was. "Are you following me?" Rebecca tried for teasing, but it came out more flustered than intended. "I could ask you the same thing." Bennett approached, gesturing at the tools he'd been examining. "I'm looking for equipment to restore that boat I mentioned. Apparently estate sales are the place to find vintage marine hardware." They're the place to find everything if you're patient. Rebecca turned back to the sideboard, running her hand over the carved details. This is exactly what one of my clients has been looking for. It's beautiful. Bennett stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and probably expensive. How do you know it's authentic? Not that I doubt you, I'm just curious. Rebecca found herself explaining the details. The hand-cut dovetails, the type of wood and how it aged, the style of the hardware and how to spot reproductions. Bennett listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions, and somehow they ended up spending the next 2 hours wandering through the sale together. He bought the marine equipment he needed plus a vintage compass that didn't work, but was beautifully crafted. Rebecca got the sideboard, a set of mid-century dining chairs, and a box of old brass hardware that would be useful for future projects. They loaded their respective vehicles, parked coincidentally next to each other, while chatting about their finds. "There's an auction house about 20 minutes from here," Rebecca said, checking her phone. "They're doing a furniture auction this afternoon if you want to tag along. I mean if you're interested. In furniture and auctions." She was babbling, heat rising in her face again. Bennett's smile was warm, crinkled his eyes at the corners. "I'd love to." They took separate vehicles but ended up sitting together at the auction, which was held in a drafty barn filled with dealers and collectors. Rebecca explained the process, how to bid without accidentally buying something, which lots were overpriced and which were steals. Bennett watched the proceedings with fascination, occasionally leaning close to whisper questions that sent shivers down her spine despite the barn's chill. She bid on and won a teak credenza that needed work but had good bones. Bennett surprised her by bidding on and winning a complete set of vintage sailing trophies, silver cups from the 1950s and 60s. "For the mantle," he explained as they collected their purchases. "Once, I have a mantle. Right now I'm still at the drywall stage. It'll come together fast once the major work is done." Rebecca helped him wrap the trophies in newspaper, their hands brushing as they worked. "You've hired good contractors. I can tell by the quality of work I've seen." High praise from someone who works with her hands. Bennett looked pleased. "Maybe once the house is done you could come see it. Give me your professional opinion." Maybe. Rebecca's heart was doing complicated things in her chest. This felt dangerously close to flirting, to something more than neighborly interaction. "We should probably head back. It's getting late." The drive home took longer than expected, traffic snarled by an accident on the coastal highway. By the time Rebecca pulled into her driveway, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the water. She was unloading the credenza, struggling with its awkward weight when Bennett appeared. "Let me help," he said, already moving to take one end. Together they maneuvered it into her workshop, setting it carefully on her work table. In the enclosed space, Rebecca was hyper-aware of Bennett's presence, the way he moved, the focused expression on his face as he helped position the piece exactly where she wanted it. "Thanks," she said, slightly breathless. "I could have managed, but it would have taken 3 trips and possibly a hernia." "Happy to help." Bennett looked around the workshop with obvious interest. "Do you mind if I look around?" "Go ahead." She watched as he examined her current projects, asking questions about her process, admiring the details of her work. He stopped in front of the mahogany table, which was nearly finished now, its surface glowing with newly restored depth. "This is incredible," Bennett said softly. "You should charge more for these pieces, probably." Rebecca moved to stand beside him. "But I like keeping them accessible. The people who buy from me, they're usually furnishing their first real home or looking for something with character that they can afford. I remember what that felt like." "When you left Boston?" It wasn't a question. Somehow, in their conversations over the past weeks, she'd mentioned bits and pieces of her past. When I left the world you probably still live in, at least partially. Rebecca kept her voice gentle, not accusatory. The one where money is the measure of everything, where success means the size of your apartment and the exclusivity of your gym membership. I hated that world, Bennett said quietly. Every single day of it. I was good at it, which somehow made it worse. People kept promoting me, giving me more responsibility, more money, and I kept thinking there has to be more than this. Rebecca turned to face him fully. In the workshop's warm lighting, his features were softer, more vulnerable. Is that why you sold your company? That's why I built something I could sell. I designed an exit strategy from the beginning. He smiled, but it was tinged with something sad. Everyone thought I was brilliant. Really, I was just desperate to escape. And now you're here. Now I'm here. Bennett's eyes met hers, and the moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Arguing with my neighbor about property sales, learning to restore boats, going to estate sales on Saturday mornings. It's the happiest I've been in years. Rebecca's breath caught. They were standing close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. It would be so easy to lean in to close the distance between them. Instead, she stepped back, breaking the spell. It's late. We should both probably eat something that isn't auction house coffee and stale muffins. Disappointment flickered across Bennett's face, but he nodded. Right, of course. Thanks for letting me tag along today. It was fun. It was, Rebecca agreed and meant it. We should do it again sometime. After he left, Rebecca stood in her workshop, hands shaking slightly. What was she doing? Bennett Irving was her neighbor, a temporary neighbor probably, someone who would get bored with small-town Maine life and move on to the next adventure. Getting involved with him would be complicated at best, heartbreaking at worst. But God, the way he'd looked at her. Rebecca forced herself to focus on work, spending the evening carefully cleaning the credenza, removing decades of grime to reveal the beautiful wood underneath. Physical labor usually cleared her mind, but tonight her thoughts kept circling back to Bennett, to the ease of their conversation, the way he really listened when she spoke. The next morning, she woke to find a basket on her porch. Inside were fresh blueberry muffins from the bakery in town, still warm with a note in strong, angular handwriting. Better than auction house muffins. Thanks again for yesterday. B. Rebecca bit into a muffin, the taste of blueberries and lemon bursting on her tongue, and admitted to herself that she was in serious trouble. Over the following weeks, Rebecca and Bennett fell into an easy friendship that felt both natural and terrifying. He'd stop by her workshop in the evenings, sometimes bringing coffee or takeout, watching as she worked and asking questions about her process. She'd wander over to his house to check on renovation progress, offering opinions on tile choices and paint colors. The house was transforming beautifully. Bennett had kept the original character while updating everything that mattered. New kitchen with commercial-grade appliances, bathrooms with heated floors, windows that could withstand hurricane-force winds. But he'd preserved the crown molding, the original hardwood floors, the built-in bookcases that Rebecca remembered from visiting Mrs. Chen years ago. You could flip this for triple what you're spending, Rebecca observed one evening. They were standing in what would be his living room, currently just framed walls and exposed beams. I'm not flipping it. Bennett handed her one of the 2 beers he'd brought, the bottles ice cold despite the warm evening. This is home, or it will be. You really mean that? Rebecca was still getting used to the idea of Bennett Irving as a permanent fixture in her life, in their small town. I really mean that. He moved to stand at the window opening, looking out at the ocean. I spent 10 years building something I didn't care about, working 80-hour weeks for goals that meant nothing to me. I'm not wasting any more time on things that don't matter." There was weight to his words, significance that felt directed at her. Rebecca joined him at the window, their shoulders almost touching. "What does matter?" she asked quietly. Bennett turned to look at her, his expression serious. "This place. The work I'm doing with local businesses, feeling like I'm part of a community instead of just passing through." He paused. "You?" Rebecca's heart stopped, then started again, racing. "Bennett, I know the timing is complicated. I know I'm probably the last person you want to get involved with." His voice was low, urgent. "But I can't stop thinking about you, Rebecca. The way you light up when you talk about furniture, how you know everyone in town and they all love you, the focus on your face when you're working. You're the most genuine person I've ever met." "I'm not that special," Rebecca protested, but her voice came out breathy, uncertain. "You are to me." Bennett reached out, tucking a curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Tell me I'm not imagining this thing between us." Rebecca's breath shuddered out. She should be careful, should protect herself. But standing there in the shell of Bennett's new home, the ocean wind blowing through the open walls, she couldn't remember why. "You're not imagining it," she whispered. Bennett's kiss was gentle at first, questioning, giving her room to pull away. But Rebecca had no intention of pulling away. She leaned into him, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders as the kiss deepened, became something urgent and claiming. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Bennett rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day I met you, when you told me your house wasn't for sale and looked at me like I was something stuck to your shoe." Rebecca laughed, giddy and overwhelmed. "I did not look at you like that. You absolutely did. It was impressive." He pulled her closer, his arms solid around her. "I fell for you right then, I think. This fierce, beautiful woman who couldn't be bought or intimidated. You fell for me because I said no to you." Rebecca leaned back to see his face. "That's very alpha male of you." "I fell for you because you knew what mattered and wouldn't compromise." Bennett's expression was serious again. "You'd built this life, this career doing what you loved, and you weren't going to let anyone take it from you. Not even some entitled millionaire with too much money and not enough sense. You have plenty of sense." Rebecca touched his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palm. "You're here, aren't you? You walked away from everything that was making you miserable. That takes courage." They stood wrapped in each other as the sun set, painting the unfinished room in shades of gold and amber. Rebecca felt something settling in her chest, a rightness she hadn't experienced in any of her previous relationships. This was different. Bennett was different. But as the initial rush of emotion faded, reality crept back in. Rebecca pulled away gently, wrapping her arms around herself. "What's wrong?" Bennett asked immediately, his brow furrowing. "Nothing. Everything." Rebecca struggled to articulate the tangle of feelings. "This is happening so fast. 6 weeks ago, you were just the guy trying to buy my house. Now what are we doing, Bennett? Getting to know each other, seeing where this goes." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Unless you want to stop, if this is too much, too fast, tell me, I'll back off." Rebecca looked at their joined hands, at the man who'd somehow become essential to her daily life without her quite noticing. "I don't want you to back off. That's what scares me. I've been so careful since moving here, keeping people at a distance, focusing on my work. And then you show up and suddenly I'm breaking all my own rules. Maybe the rules need breaking." Bennett squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not asking for promises or commitments, just a chance to see what this could be." "Okay," Rebecca said, the word feeling momentous. "We'll see where this goes." Where it went. Over the next several weeks, was into something deeper and more significant than Rebecca had anticipated. Bennett finished the major renovations on his house and moved in properly, filling the rooms with an eclectic mix of furniture. Pieces he'd bought at auctions and estate sales with Rebecca, some modern items ordered online, and a few antiques Rebecca had restored specifically for him. They fell into a rhythm of domesticity that felt both exciting and comfortable. Morning coffee on one of their porches, whichever had the better view of the sunrise. Dinners together, taking turns cooking or walking into town to the handful of restaurants that stayed open past tourist season. Evenings in Rebecca's workshop, where Bennett learned to help with basic restoration tasks under her guidance, or in his house, where they'd plan his boat restoration or research local businesses he might invest in. The town noticed, of course. In a place this small, nothing stayed secret for long. Rebecca endured good-natured teasing from the coffee shop owner, knowing looks from the woman who ran the used bookstore, and direct interrogation from her friend Sarah, who owned the art gallery on Main Street. "So you and the millionaire," Sarah said without preamble, cornering Rebecca at the farmer's market on a Saturday morning. "His name is Bennett." Rebecca examined tomatoes with more attention than they warranted. "Bennett the millionaire, who wanted to buy your house and whom you swore you'd never speak to again." Sarah grinned, utterly unrepentant. "And now you're what, dating, living together, engaged, dating, just dating?" Rebecca felt her face heat. "It's new. It's adorable is what it is." Sarah's expression softened. "I haven't seen you this happy since you moved here. He's good for you." Rebecca wanted to protest, to maintain some distance and perspective. But Sarah was right. She was happy, genuinely, effervescently happy in a way she hadn't been in years. Bennett made her laugh, challenged her thinking, supported her work, and kissed her like she was the most precious thing in his world. It wasn't all perfect. They had their first real argument 6 weeks into officially dating, over something stupid that spiraled into something bigger. Bennett had been approached by a developer who wanted to buy several properties in town, including the vacant lot on the other side of Rebecca's cottage, to build a boutique hotel. Bennett thought it could be good for the town's economy, bringing in tourist dollars year-round. Rebecca thought it would destroy the character of their neighborhood and drive up property taxes, forcing out longtime residents. "You're being short-sighted," Bennett said, frustration clear in his voice. They were in his kitchen. What should have been a peaceful dinner turned tense. "More tourists means more customers for local businesses, including yours. I don't need more customers. I need my neighbors, my community." Rebecca pushed away her half-eaten pasta. "This isn't about business, Bennett. It's about preserving what makes this place special. Nothing stays the same forever. Change isn't inherently bad." Bennett's jaw was tight, his businessman persona emerging. "Smart development can enhance a community instead of destroying it," says the millionaire who can afford to live anywhere. The words came out sharper than Rebecca intended, hitting below the belt. Bennett flinched. "That's not fair." "Maybe not, but it's true." Rebecca stood, suddenly needing distance. "You've been here 4 months, Bennett. I've built a life here over 6 years. Forgive me if I don't trust your judgment about what's best for this town." "This isn't about judgment. It's about you being so stuck in your ways that you can't see any perspective but your own." Bennett stood too, his height suddenly intimidating in the small kitchen. "You left Boston because you hated the corporate world, and now you're trying to freeze this place in amber so it never changes either. That's not preservation, Rebecca. That's fear." The accusation stung because it held a grain of truth. Rebecca grabbed her jacket from the back of her chair. "I need to go. Don't leave like this." Bennett's voice softened, but Rebecca was already heading for the door. "I'll talk to you tomorrow, or whenever I'm less angry." She stormed back to her cottage, fury and hurt churning in her stomach. How dare he accuse her of being afraid, of not seeing other perspectives? She'd been brave enough to completely restart her life, to walk away from security for passion. That wasn't fear, except maybe it was, a small voice whispered in her mind. Maybe Bennett was right, and she was so protective of the life she'd built that she couldn't risk anything threatening it, even positive change. Rebecca didn't sleep well that night. She kept replaying the argument, seeing it from different angles. By morning, her anger had faded into something more complex. Recognition that they'd both said things they shouldn't have, that this was their first real test as a couple. She found Bennett on his porch at dawn, nursing coffee and looking as tired as she felt. When he saw her, relief flooded his face. "I'm sorry," they both said simultaneously, then laughed despite the lingering tension. "Can I go first?" Bennett asked, and at Rebecca's nod, continued. "I was out of line last night. You're right that I'm new here, that I don't understand all the dynamics and history, and calling you afraid was cruel. You're one of the bravest people I know." Rebecca climbed the porch steps, settling into the chair beside him. "I'm sorry, too. That crack about you being a millionaire was uncalled for, and you might be right that I'm too protective of the status quo. I love this place so much. The thought of it changing, becoming something unrecognizable, terrifies me. What if we could shape how it changes?" Bennett reached for her hand. "I've been thinking about it all night. What if instead of fighting development, we work to ensure it happens on the community's terms? You know everyone in town, understand what matters to them. I have experience with real estate and business development. Together, we could make sure any changes benefit long-time residents instead of displacing them." Rebecca considered this, turning it over in her mind. It was a more nuanced approach than her instinctive rejection of all change. That could work, maybe. It would take a lot of coordination, getting people organized. But you could do it. We could do it. Bennett's enthusiasm was building now, the way it did when he got excited about a project. Start a community development group. Review any proposed projects. Negotiate terms that protect existing residents. Hell, we could set up a fund to help people with property tax increases. Ensure long-time homeowners aren't forced out. Despite her residual wariness, Rebecca felt herself getting pulled into his vision. This was what Bennett did best: see possibilities, find ways to solve problems that seemed intractable. "You'd fund something like that," in a heartbeat. "This is my community too now. I want to protect it as much as you do." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I just come at it from a different angle. That doesn't mean we can't work together. No more calling me afraid." Rebecca tried for stern but couldn't quite manage it. "No more calling you afraid, though I reserve the right to gently point out when you're being stubborn. As long as I can do the same when you're being high-handed and used to everyone following your orders." Bennett's grin was rueful. "Fair enough." They spent the morning planning, excitement building as they sketched out ideas for community organization and protection. By the time they finally ate breakfast at noon, Rebecca felt closer to Bennett than ever. They'd navigated their first real conflict and come out stronger, more aligned. The community development group became their joint project over the next several months. Rebecca reached out to longtime residents, business owners, and local officials, organizing meetings and listening sessions. Bennett provided structure and funding, helping draft bylaws and legal frameworks. Together, they built something that gave the town a voice in its own future. The developer with the hotel plans ended up working with the group, modifying the proposal to include affordable housing units for local workers, and ensuring the design matched the town's historic character. It wasn't perfect, but it was a compromise everyone could accept. Through it all, Rebecca and Bennett's relationship deepened. They learned each other's quirks and habits, pet peeves and love languages. Rebecca discovered that Bennett was an early riser who got grumpy if he didn't exercise, that he had nightmares sometimes about his corporate life, that he could spend hours researching the perfect tool or piece of equipment for a project. Bennett learned that Rebecca sang off-key while working, that she was fiercely loyal to the people she loved, that she had a weakness for chocolate chip cookies and bad action movies. By the time the leaves changed color and tourists disappeared for the season, they'd settled into something that felt permanent. Bennett's boat restoration was progressing beautifully. A gorgeous wooden sailboat from the 1960s that he worked on with the single-minded focus Rebecca recognized from her own furniture projects. Rebecca's business had grown, partly thanks to Bennett's encouragement to raise her prices and expand her online presence. They were in Rebecca's workshop on a cold October evening, Rebecca working on a mission-style bookcase while Bennett sanded boat parts at the table she'd cleared for him when he said, "Move in with me." Rebecca's hand slipped, her chisel gouging deeper than intended. "What? Move in with me?" Bennett set down his sandpaper, his expression serious. "We spend every night together anyway, either at your place or mine. This way we'd have more space. You could keep this workshop, but we'd live in the house, together. That's a big step." Rebecca's heart was racing, equal parts excitement and terror. "We've only been together 8 months, I know, and if it's too soon, tell me. But Rebecca, I can't imagine my life without you in it. I don't want to." He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "I love you. I'm in love with you. Have been for months now. Moving in together feels like the natural next step, but only if you're ready. You love me." Rebecca's voice came out barely above a whisper, completely, desperately. Bennett's smile was tender. "Is that okay?" "More than okay." Rebecca kissed him, trying to pour everything she felt into the gesture. "I love you too. Have for a while now, actually. I was just too chicken to say it first." Bennett laughed against her mouth. "So, is that a yes to moving in?" Rebecca pulled back to look at him, this man who'd become her best friend and partner, who challenged and supported her in equal measure. "It's a yes, on one condition. Anything. We keep our finances separate. I pay half the expenses, or at least half the ones I can afford." At Bennett's start of protest, she pressed a finger to his lips. "I'm serious. I know you have more money than God, but I need to contribute equally to our life together. It matters to me, even though it's completely unnecessary." Bennett's tone was gentle, understanding. "Even though. Can you accept that? If it matters to you, then yes." He kissed her finger, still pressed against his lips. "Though I'm going to spoil you in other ways, that's non-negotiable." Moving in together was simultaneously easier and harder than Rebecca expected. The logistics were simple enough. Moving her clothes and personal items into Bennett's larger house, combining their kitchens, negotiating closet space. But there were adjustments, moments of friction as they learned to share space full-time. Bennett was neat to the point of compulsive, everything in its place, while Rebecca tended to leave projects scattered around. Bennett liked the house cold at night for sleeping, while Rebecca preferred warmth. Rebecca was a night owl who did her best creative work after dark, while Bennett crashed hard by 10 and rose with the sun. They worked through each issue with patience and compromise, learning each other's boundaries and needs. Bennett set up a dedicated project space for Rebecca, where she could spread out without worrying about neatness. Rebecca got better about tidying shared spaces and invested in a space heater for the bedroom. They soundproofed Rebecca's workshop so she could work late without disturbing Bennett's sleep. The first snow came in November, heavy and early, blanketing everything in white silence. Rebecca woke to find Bennett already up, standing at the bedroom window watching the storm. "Beautiful," he murmured as she joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "Welcome to your first Maine winter." Rebecca rested her cheek against his back. "Still think staying here year-round was a good idea, best decision I ever made." Bennett turned in her arms, pulling her close. "Right after falling in love with you." They spent the snowy day inside, working on their respective projects and stealing moments together. Bennett made soup from scratch, while Rebecca organized her workshop, preparing for the winter months when she did most of her intensive restoration work. In the evening, they curled up on the couch Bennett had bought specifically because Rebecca loved deep sofas perfect for napping, and watched the snow continue to fall. "I have something for you," Bennett said during a lull in their movie. He extracted himself from their tangle of limbs and disappeared into his study, returning with a small wrapped box. Rebecca's stomach flipped. The box was too large for a ring, but still, the ceremonial way Bennett presented it made her nervous. "What's this for?" "Early Christmas present. Open it." Inside was a key, old and ornate, attached to a tag with Rebecca's handwriting on it. It took her a moment to recognize it as one of the keys she'd removed from a vintage secretary desk months ago, before she and Bennett had even started dating. She'd mentioned she was looking for a period-appropriate replacement, but hadn't found the right one yet. "Bennett, how did you?" She looked up, eyes stinging with sudden tears. "I've been searching for months. Found it at an estate sale 3 towns over last week." His smile was soft, pleased with her reaction. "I know it's for work, but I thought maybe it could also be symbolic. You gave me the key to a different kind of life, Rebecca. One that actually means something. I love it. I love you." Rebecca kissed him, tasting salt from her own tears. "You're ridiculous and romantic, and I don't deserve you. You deserve everything." Bennett cupped her face in his hands. "I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Not quite a proposal, but close, a promise of intent. Rebecca felt the weight of them settle around her heart, not constraining but supporting, like finding the perfect foundation for a precious antique. Christmas came, their first together. Rebecca's parents drove up from Connecticut. Initially skeptical about this wealthy boyfriend, their daughter had acquired but won over by Bennett's genuine warmth and his obvious devotion to Rebecca. Bennett's family was more complicated. His parents had passed away years ago, and he was estranged from his only sibling, a brother he rarely talked about. But his cousin flew in from California, a funny woman named Marie who immediately bonded with Rebecca over shared exasperation with Bennett's perfectionist tendencies. They hosted Christmas dinner in the house that felt increasingly like theirs instead of just Bennett's. The rooms full of laughter and good food, and the kind of family warmth Rebecca had always craved. Watching Bennett carve the turkey, laughing at one of her father's terrible jokes, Rebecca felt a surge of contentment so strong it was almost painful. This was what she'd left Boston searching for: connection, purpose, love. She'd found all 3 in this small coastal town, in her work, in the man currently attempting to explain sailing terminology to her thoroughly landlocked parents. The new year arrived with a major storm that knocked out power for 3 days. Rebecca and Bennett huddled in the house with blankets and candles, the fireplace working overtime to keep them warm. They played cards by candlelight, told stories, made love in front of the fire with a tenderness that left Rebecca breathless. On the second night, wrapped in blankets with the storm howling outside, Bennett said, "Marry me." Rebecca's breath caught. "What? Marry me?" He shifted to face her properly, his expression visible in the firelight. "I know we said we wouldn't rush things, but Rebecca, I've never been more sure of anything. I want to build a life with you, officially and completely. I want to wake up next to you for the next 50 years. I want to restore furniture and boats and maybe someday fix up that house at the end of the road and fill it with kids who'll grow up covered in sawdust and seawater. Kids, Rebecca's voice came out strangled, if you want them. If not, that's okay too. I just want you, whatever that looks like. Bennett took her hand, and Rebecca realized he was trembling slightly. I don't have a ring yet. I was going to wait, plan something elaborate. But sitting here with you, listening to the storm, I couldn't wait anymore. So I'm asking now, without preparation or speeches or anything but the truth. I love you completely, and I want to spend my life loving you. Will you marry me? Rebecca was crying, she realized, tears streaming down her face. Yes, God, yes, of course I'll marry you. Bennett pulled her into his arms, and they held each other as the storm raged outside, both laughing and crying. They were engaged. They were building a life together. All the fear and caution Rebecca had armored herself with had melted away, replaced by certainty that this man, this place, this life was exactly where she was meant to be. The ring came 2 weeks later, after power was restored and life returned to normal. Bennett took her to the jewelry store in Portland, insisting she choose exactly what she wanted instead of him surprising her with something that might not suit her style. She chose a vintage sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, something with history and character that felt right on her hand. They told everyone at the monthly community development meeting, and the whole room erupted in cheers. Rebecca's friend, Sarah, immediately began planning an engagement party. The coffee shop owner promised a custom blend for the wedding. Even the curmudgeonly harbor master, who usually had something negative to say about everything, offered gruff congratulations. Planning the wedding became their spring project. They decided on a small ceremony in June, just family and close friends, on the beach between their 2 properties. Rebecca would keep her cottage as dedicated workshop space while they lived in Bennett's larger house. Simple, perfect, right. But first, Rebecca had to navigate the complicated task of merging her independent life with Bennett's, not just physically but emotionally and practically. She'd built her business alone, made all her own decisions, answered to no one. Now she had a partner who wanted to be involved, to support her, to occasionally challenge her thinking. It was an adjustment. When Bennett suggested hiring an assistant to help with Rebecca's growing workload, she initially bristled at the interference. When he offered to design her a new website, she felt defensive about the one she'd built herself. But gradually, she learned to accept help without seeing it as criticism, to recognize that Bennett's input came from love rather than a desire to control. Bennett had his own adjustments to make. He was used to making decisions quickly, moving forward without extensive consultation. But Rebecca needed time to process, to consider all angles. His instinct to throw money at problems didn't always align with her preference for finding creative, low-cost solutions. They had to learn each other's rhythms, find ways to work together that honored both their styles. By spring, they'd found their balance. Bennett's boat was finally ready to launch, a process that involved half the town helping to transport it from his workshop to the water. Rebecca stood on the dock, watching as the beautiful wooden vessel touched water for the first time in years, and felt overwhelming pride in what Bennett had accomplished. "Want to go for a sail?" Bennett called from the deck, his grin infectious. Rebecca had never been sailing, had been frankly terrified of the idea. But looking at Bennett, sun-bronzed and happy and so devastatingly handsome she could barely stand it, she found herself nodding. The sail was magic. Bennett was patient and encouraging, teaching her the basics while keeping them close to shore. Rebecca felt the wind catch the sails, the boat responding to Bennett's skilled handling, and understood why he loved this. There was something meditative about it, being at the mercy of elements while still maintaining control through knowledge and skill. They anchored in a quiet cove, ate the lunch they'd packed, and made love in the small cabin below deck, with afternoon sunlight filtering through the portholes. Afterward, lying in Bennett's arms while the boat rocked gently, Rebecca felt completely at peace. "I want to do this forever," she murmured. "Sail." Bennett's voice was lazy, satisfied. "This, us, everything." Rebecca propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "I want to grow old with you, Bennett Irving. I want to watch your hair turn gray and fight about whether to repair or replace things and teach our hypothetical kids terrible habits." "Terrible habits like what?" His eyes crinkled with amusement. "Like singing off-key while working. Like leaving projects everywhere. Like loving something so much you can't imagine doing anything else." Rebecca traced the line of his jaw. "The habits you've learned to love in me. I loved those things from the beginning." Bennett caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Even when you were telling me to take my money and leave you alone. Especially then, according to you." "Especially then," he agreed solemnly, then spoiled it by pulling her down for a kiss that quickly grew heated. They barely made it back to shore before dark, both giddy and sunburned and so in love it was probably obnoxious to everyone who saw them. Rebecca didn't care. After years of playing it safe, of protecting herself, she was all in on this relationship, on this life they were building together. The wedding planning intensified as June approached. They kept it simple. Folding chairs on the beach, an arch Rebecca built and decorated with local flowers, a reception in Bennett's backyard with catering from the restaurant he'd helped expand. Rebecca's dress was vintage, naturally, a 1950s tea-length gown in ivory lace that she'd found at an estate sale and carefully restored. Bennett wore a simple navy suit, no tie, looking unfairly handsome. The night before the wedding, Rebecca stayed at her cottage, honoring the tradition of not seeing the groom before the ceremony. Sarah stayed with her, helping with last-minute preparations and providing moral support. "Cold feet?" Sarah asked, watching Rebecca pace. "Burning feet." "The opposite of cold." Rebecca stopped at the window overlooking the beach, where tomorrow she'd marry the man who'd changed her entire world. "I'm terrified and excited and so happy I could burst. Is that normal?" "Extremely normal." Sarah joined her at the window. "He's good for you, you know. You're softer now, more open, less scared." "I was scared before, terrified. Of getting hurt, of trusting people, of anything disrupting the life you'd built." Sarah's voice was gentle. "Bennett didn't disrupt it. He enhanced it, became part of it. That's how you know he's the right one." Rebecca wiped at sudden tears. "Don't make me cry the night before my wedding. My eyes will be puffy. Cry now, look gorgeous tomorrow. That's my plan for you." But Sarah hugged her, and they stood together watching the waves, two friends on the edge of everything changing. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the kind of June day that felt designed specifically for celebrating. Rebecca woke early, jittery with nerves and excitement. Sarah helped her dress, pinning her hair in a simple updo that showed off the vintage pearl earrings that had been her grandmother's. "You look beautiful," Sarah said softly, stepping back to admire her work. Rebecca studied herself in the mirror. She did look beautiful, but more than that, she looked happy. Her eyes sparkled, her smile was genuine, her entire being radiated joy. This was right. She was making the right choice. The ceremony was scheduled for late afternoon to catch the golden hour light. Rebecca waited in her cottage until she got the text from Marie that everything was ready. Then, With Sarah as her only attendant and her father waiting to walk her down the makeshift aisle, she stepped out into the most important moment of her life. Bennett stood under the arch she'd built, flanked by his cousin Marie as his best woman, and the look on his face when he saw Rebecca made her stumble slightly. Such love, such wonder, such certainty. He was looking at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. The walk to him felt both endless and instantaneous. Her father kissed her cheek, shook Bennett's hand, and stepped aside. Then it was just the two of them, the officiant's words washing over Rebecca without fully registering. She was too focused on Bennett's hands holding hers, on the vows they'd written themselves. "Rebecca," Bennett said, his voice rough with emotion, "you gave me a reason to stay when I was ready to keep running. You showed me what it means to build instead of just acquiring, to invest in people and community and things that last. I promise to love you fiercely and gently, to support your dreams while pursuing our shared ones, to always choose you every day for the rest of my life." Rebecca's turn. She'd rehearsed this, but looking at Bennett, the words came from somewhere deeper than memory. "Bennett, you challenged everything I thought I wanted my life to look like, and somehow made it better than I imagined. You showed me that letting someone in doesn't mean losing myself, that love can be both safe and adventurous. I promise to love you with my whole heart, to build this life with you, to face every challenge together, and to never stop being grateful that you walked into my world and refused to leave." The rings were simple gold bands that would withstand years of manual labor and ocean spray. They exchanged them with shaking hands, and when the officiant pronounced them married, Bennett pulled Rebecca into a kiss that was probably too passionate for public viewing but absolutely perfect for the moment. They walked back down the aisle as husband and wife to cheering from their small gathering of loved ones. The reception was everything Rebecca had wanted, casual and warm, full of good food and better company. They danced as the sun set, Bennett holding her close while someone's phone provided music. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Irving?" Bennett murmured against her hair. Rebecca pulled back to look at him. "Actually, I'm keeping Palmer professionally, but personally I'm feeling perfect." "Married to you, perfect." "Married to you," Bennett echoed, like he was testing out the words. "I like the sound of that." They honeymooned simply, spending a week sailing up the coast, stopping at different harbors and islands, exploring and making love and existing in their own perfect bubble. But Rebecca was happy to return home, to their house and their life and their community. The first year of marriage was adjustment and joy in equal measure. They had arguments about stupid things like whose turn it was to take out the trash and serious things like whether to expand Bennett's investment portfolio into riskier ventures. But they always came back together, always chose each other, always remembered why they'd made those promises on the beach. Rebecca's business continued to grow, and she did eventually hire an assistant, a young woman named Julia who was eager to learn furniture restoration. Bennett's investment work flourished, and he became a respected figure in the local business community, known for his ethical practices and commitment to sustainable growth. They bought the vacant lot on the other side of Rebecca's cottage when it came up for sale, not to build on but to preserve as open space. They fostered a dog from the local shelter, who became a permanent fixture. They became that couple people pointed to as relationship goals, though they both knew the reality was less perfect and more about daily choice and commitment. On their second anniversary, Rebecca told Bennett she was pregnant. They stood in the workshop where so much of their relationship had unfolded, surrounded by furniture in various states of restoration, and cried together. "We're having a baby," Bennett kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We're having a baby," Rebecca confirmed, laughing through tears. The pregnancy was mostly easy, though Rebecca resented being too large to comfortably work at her bench by the third trimester. Bennett was attentive to the point of being overbearing, which led to several arguments about personal space and autonomy. But when their daughter was born in early spring, a perfect tiny human with Rebecca's auburn hair and Bennett's dark eyes, everything else faded away. They named her Charlotte, and she was adored by everyone who met her. The community rallied around them, providing meals and babysitting and advice, both wanted and otherwise. Rebecca learned to work with a baby strapped to her in a carrier, Charlotte sleeping peacefully, despite the sound of sanders and saws. Bennett became expert at one-handed boat maintenance while holding his daughter. Life became about different rhythms, nap schedules and nighttime feedings, first smiles and first steps. Rebecca had worried that motherhood might diminish her identity as an artist and businesswoman, but instead it expanded who she was. She was all of it: mother and furniture restorer, wife and friend, community member and artist. When Charlotte was 2, they started talking about another baby. When she was 3, Rebecca got pregnant again, this time with a boy they named Henry. Their house filled with noise and chaos, and so much love Rebecca sometimes felt overwhelmed by it. Bennett proved to be an exceptional father, patient and playful, teaching their children about boats and ocean ecology, and the value of working with their hands. Rebecca taught them to see beauty in old things, to appreciate craftsmanship, to understand that value wasn't just monetary. The years flowed past, marked by children growing and business evolving and love deepening. They had hard years when money was tighter than comfortable, when Bennett's investments didn't pan out, when Rebecca lost a major commission. They had glorious years when everything clicked, when the kids were healthy and happy, when their marriage felt effortless. Through it all, they chose each other. Every morning, every argument, every celebration, they chose this life they'd built together. On their 10th anniversary, Bennett surprised Rebecca with a renewal of their vows, this time with Charlotte and Henry participating. They stood on the same beach where they'd married, older and more weathered but infinitely richer in all the ways that mattered. 10 years ago, Bennett said, holding Rebecca's hands while their children watched with the kind of embarrassed affection only kids could manage, you became my wife. Today, I want to recommit to being your husband, your partner, your best friend. You've given me everything that makes life worth living: love, family, purpose, home. I choose you today and always. Rebecca's turn was harder because she was crying. Bennett, you gave me the courage to want more than safety. You showed me that taking risks on love was worth it. These 10 years have been the best of my life, and I can't wait for the next 50. I choose you, today and every day. They renewed their rings, same simple gold bands, now worn and scratched from years of use. Perfect, like everything else they'd built together. That evening, after the kids were in bed and the house was quiet, Rebecca and Bennett sat on their porch watching the ocean, Bennett's arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever miss it?" Rebecca asked softly. "The corporate world, the power, the money?" "Never." Bennett's answer was immediate, firm. "I miss nothing about that life. This, right here, is everything I ever wanted and didn't know how to find until I inherited a beach house and met a stubborn woman who refused to sell hers." Rebecca laughed, remembering. "Best decision I ever made, refusing that offer." "Best inheritance I ever received," Bennett countered, then paused. "Actually, no. The best inheritance was this life, this family. The house was just the catalyst." "So poetic," Rebecca teased, but she understood what he meant. The beach house had brought Bennett to her, but everything that came after was what they'd built together. Years continued passing. Charlotte grew into a thoughtful teenager with her mother's eye for beauty and her father's head for business. Henry became a rambunctious pre-teen obsessed with marine biology and sailing. Rebecca's furniture restoration work became sought after, with waiting lists and features in design magazines. Bennett's investment work evolved into mentorship, helping young entrepreneurs the way he wished someone had helped him. They became the couple who'd been together forever, who finished each other's sentences, who could communicate with just a look across a crowded room. They had their struggles, health scares and financial worries, and the normal challenges of raising children and maintaining careers. But they faced everything together, their partnership stronger for having weathered storms both literal and metaphorical. On their 20th anniversary, Rebecca woke to find Bennett already up, standing at their bedroom window watching the sunrise over the ocean, just as he had so many times before. "Can't sleep?" she asked, joining him. "Just thinking." Bennett pulled her against his chest, resting his chin on her head. 20 years ago, I was a miserable millionaire with more money than purpose, running from everything that mattered. Now I'm a moderately wealthy man with a family I adore, a community I value, and a wife who makes every day worth living. It's funny how life works out. "Hilarious," Rebecca agreed, smiling. "For the record, I'm glad you inherited that beach house, and I'm glad I was too stubborn to sell mine." "Your stubbornness is one of your most attractive qualities." "Only one of them." Bennett turned her in his arms, his expression tender. "One of many. Along with your creativity, your passion, your kindness, the way you sing off-key while working, how you still get paint in your hair despite decades of practice. Sweet talker." But Rebecca was glowing under his praise. After 20 years, Bennett could still make her feel cherished, valued, loved. They spent the day with family, a gathering of the community they'd built together over 2 decades. Their children, now young adults pursuing their own dreams. Friends from town who'd become like family. Business partners and proteges. The house was full of laughter and love, and the kind of warmth that comes from people genuinely caring about each other. As evening fell and guests departed, Rebecca found herself back on the porch with Bennett, their traditional ending to important days. The ocean stretched before them, constant and changing, just like their life together. "You remember what you said on our wedding day?" Bennett asked, his hand finding hers automatically. "About building this life together." "I remember." Rebecca squeezed his hand. "We've built something good, haven't we? We've built something extraordinary." Bennett's voice was thick with emotion. "A family, a home, a legacy. All because you refused to sell your house to some entitled millionaire. Best refusal I ever made." Rebecca leaned into him, perfectly content. "I love you, Bennett Irving, today and always." "I love you, Rebecca Palmer Irving." He kissed the top of her head. "Today and always." They sat together as stars emerged, husband and wife, partners in every sense, watching the ocean that had brought them together and would be there long after they were gone. But for now they were here, they were together, and their love story continued, written in restored furniture and rebuilt boats, in children raised and communities strengthened, in every sunrise watched together and every challenge faced as one. The millionaire had inherited a beach house beside hers, and neither of them had expected what would happen when she refused to sell. But life had a way of surprising you, of taking what seemed like an obstacle and transforming it into the greatest gift. Their love story had started with refusal and grown into acceptance, partnership, and a love that would last all their remaining days together. And in the end, that was the best inheritance of all.